Senator Harris is now in the building, so she needs to hear your voices. Now, I want you to know that we had a problem this morning. Hey, Miss Sally. We had a problem this morning. They told me that we were going to have about 700 people in the building. And they said we had enough seats to accommodate that. And then you look in the back and they had to open up more space. I don't know if you saw that there was a barrier there. So I want you to know that we are clicking past these numbers. Hey, Glory. The most amazing thing when people ask me, the most amazing thing is when people ask me, tell me about Kamala Harris in South Carolina, I say, something is happening. Something is happening. Look around you. You see, my name is Bakari Sellers, for those who do not know. I am from the big city of Denmark, South Carolina, where we have 3 stoplights and a blinking light. So I'm just a good old-fashioned country boy, but I'm here today because I support Kamala Harris. And I'm here just to tell you briefly why I drove all the way up here to Myrtle Beach and wanted to tell you why I support Senator Harris. You know, before she got here yesterday she made some stops in Hartsville and Florence. And this morning she went to Marion. And you know, I always tell people that there are many times in South Carolina there are voices that go unheard. It's not as if they're not screaming out for help, but many times they simply just go unheard. But Senator Harris has made a point that she's going to take her time and listen to every single voter in South Carolina. That's what we need and that's what we deserve. But even more importantly, I like to go back to those folk, and this is for the media in the back who sometimes, hey Carolyn, who sometimes create these narratives that maybe a woman can't win. There you go. My 14-year-old daughter always tells me, Bakari, that a woman's place is in the White House. To say this, I don't know if you all remember that other tall, skinny guy with a funny name. But nobody believed in him either, right? But it's time that we focus our energy. It's time that in South Carolina sometimes we get a little depressed because of what we send to Columbia day in and day out and what we see in Washington, D.C. day in and day out. But I want you to know that Senator Harris gives us hope, and let me tell you why. Because she's not running because of what this country was. She's not running because of what this country is. She's running for president because of what this country can be. And I want you to also know that it doesn't come as much surprise, but she knows that she stands on the shoulders of strong women like Shirley Chisholm. And we all know that Shirley Chisholm, she put a woman named Hillary Clinton on her shoulders. And Hillary Clinton chipped away at that glass so that now Senator Harris can shatter it for good. You know, I support Kamala Harris because I believe in the promise of tomorrow. Because I'm tired of living in a South Carolina, in a country where people can drink dirty water and people tell me that's okay. I'm tired of having a corridor of shame where kids go to school and their heating and air are falling apart and their infrastructure, it just doesn't work. I'm tired of living in a South Carolina, in a country where we have hospitals that are shutting down, and if you have a heart attack, that's a death sentence. I'm tired of living in a country where the manufacturers come just for a minute, then they pack up and they leave and go elsewhere. I want somebody who represents my interests, who understands our history, and who wants to lead us into a new generation, because I now have these 2 6-month-old twins who look up at me every single day. And I just smile when I think about them. I have Stokely and Sadie, and they look up at me every single day, and I need to be able to look at them and tell them that I did absolutely everything in my power so that they can have a woman as President of the United States that they can look to with respect, that was restoring the moral fabric of this country. So stand up if you want to make sure that this country has the leadership it deserves, and stand up if you know, like I know, that Kamala Harris is a bad woman who can get it done.
say it. So, I want y'all to understand the woman, the mother, the leader that we are about to introduce to y'all. I want y'all to understand the things that she can do for our country and for us to create this nation. I feel very divided because, as most of you know, America does not have just one group of people. We come from all over the place. So there's many things that make us us. And she understands that. I feel like all of the presidential candidates that we have running are really powerful leaders. But if you want somebody who understands you, if you want someone who can relate to you, if you want someone to feel like they related to you, she is the woman. I am a mother. I have 4 children. So I look to her because everyone sitting in this audience right now, although we are making this decision, this affects our children. We may not be here to see what this world becomes. So we must do what we can while we are still here to fix something. May it be with our school systems, may it be with our little children who don't classify as the sex they were born. There's so many things wrong, so many things. But if you give her the chance and you listen to her, truly listen to her speak, not just because she is Kamala Harris, but because she is us. Because she had to deal with desegregation, because she had to deal with being looked at differently. I have to deal with being looked at differently. We all have to deal with being looked at differently. It's just not in one race. And she sees that. She is here for the people. She is here for us. So I just want y'all to take the time today to listen to her really speak, to listen to the things that are coming out of her mouth, to understand. I will give you guys the opportunity to ask some questions. So anyone who may have a question on their mind or anything of that nature, when time comes, please raise your hand. This is for you. This is not for us. We are doing this for all of you. We want to know what you guys desire America to look like. If you put her in the chair, I'm pretty sure we'll get there. Can I? Oh, okay. Hey! Please welcome to the stage Kamala Harris.
I just want to thank everyone for this afternoon. There's so many things you could be doing with your time, and that you've chosen to spend it with us. It really means a lot to me, and I want to just thank you. I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for your time. Well, okay, so I'm going to share with you a few of my thoughts about where we are and where I think we need to go some of the plans that we have. And then I would really like to take questions. I will tell you, I fully intend to win this election. But for me, a measure of our success, of course, is that. But it is also that at the end of this process, that we are relevant. And in order to ensure that, especially at this phase of the campaign, it is very, very important to me that I listen as much, if not more, than I talk. So I'm really looking forward to our conversation. We'll pass around the microphone. But I'll start with just sharing with you a couple of thoughts I have about where we are. And let's start with this. So, you know, I know that over the last 2 years and some months, a lot of us have been asking questions of ourselves and each other. And some of those questions have been, what is going on? What is happening? Aren't we better than this? Right? What is going on with our democracy? Will our democracy remain intact? Right? These are the questions we've been asking. Over the course of the last couple of years, some of us have been throwing objects at that inanimate object called a television, going through individual and group therapies, trying to figure it all out. And so here's what I'd like to start by talking about. And it is this. We're good. We're good. So here's how I think about it. And I know we just celebrated the independence of our nation. And we should always remember, though, July 4th or beyond July 4th, our framers, the founders of our nation, they imagined a moment like this. They planned for it. And the beautiful design of the democracy that they created for us, they imagined a moment where there may be tyranny, where there may be an abuse of power, where there may be an exercise of raw power. And so they built us a beautiful design for the democracy upon which our republic stands. And it was about checks and balances, right? So think about it. The way I think about it is think about our democracy or the republic as being a tabletop, standing on 4 legs. 3 independent, co-equal branches of government, and a free and independent press. And let's think about what has happened over the last couple of months. And so over the last couple of years, so this administration came in, this president came in, and one of his first orders of business was try and get rid of the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. A policy that brought health care to tens of millions of people. A policy that was about saying our children should be able to be on our coverage until they reach the age of 26. A policy that was about saying pre-existing conditions should never be a barrier to having access to health care. This administration came in and attempted to play politics with public health because they had a political agenda. But let's remember what happened. And I was actually there. Many of you probably witnessed it on television, and some of you probably came to DC to make sure your voices were heard during those 9-something months when they tried to defeat it. And what happened? It was around, I think, 2 o'clock in the morning in our United States Congress in the Senate well, and led in part by the late, great John McCain. The United States Congress said, you've gone too far. Let's think about it. Let's think about those various bans. First order, the Muslim ban, the retraction of a promise we made to those dreamers when we gave them DACA protection, right? And let's remember what that was about. It was about saying for that population of young people, many of whom were brought here before they could walk or talk, We had a policy in place that said, well, if they clear a vet, if they give us information about themselves, including, are they living a productive life? Are they living a lawful life? What are the circumstances of their arrival? We said, well, if you clear the vet, we will give you deferral from deportation, deferred action for childhood arrivals, DACA. We learned in that process that many of those young people had served in our military, were studying in our colleges, were working in Fortune 400, 500 companies. And we said, we will give you deferral of deportation. What happened? This administration came in and broke America's promise to these young people. But what happened? Co-equal, independent branch of government, our courts, said, you've gone too far. Democracy in action. Let's remember, had the press corps not gone down in droves to the border to allow the American people to witness a human rights abuse being committed by the United States government and separating those children from their parents, the American people would not have been able to say in a bipartisan way, you gotta stop that. That is contrary to the morals and values of who we are. And so the American people spoke up, and at least on paper, that policy ended. Our democracy is intact. You know, it's kind of, and then if you think about it like a house, yes, we're kind of experiencing a natural disaster. And some of the shingles are falling off, but the house is still standing. The house is still standing. And part of the reason is we are a nation that was built by the people and for the people. And therein lies our strength. Therein lies our strength. So that's how I think about where we are at this moment in time. I think about the challenges before us, but I also think about who we are and where we can go with a great sense of optimism. And I'll tell you in terms of my background, my sister Maya and I, she's here somewhere. There you are. There's Maya. She and I were raised by parents who met when they were students and active in the civil rights movement in the 1960s. And so we joke that we grew up surrounded by a bunch of adults who spent full time marching and shouting about that thing called justice. You know what I'm talking about. And frankly, the heroes among the many in that movement were the lawyers. It was Thurgood Marshall and Charles Hamilton Houston and Constance Baker Motley. And these individuals who understood the skill of the profession of law to translate the passion from the streets to the courtrooms of our country. And the ability then to do the work of reminding folks of what we must always remind, which is that great promise we articulated in 1776, that we are all and should be treated as equals. So that's why I decided I wanted to be a lawyer. And went to Howard University, then went back home. Went to law school, you know. And I will tell you also a bit more about our mother. Our mother was all of 5 feet tall. But if you had ever met her, you would have thought she was 7 to 10 feet tall. She was fierce. And she was the kind of parent and person who's taught us that we will be judged based on the impact that we have on the lives of others. She taught us that we must live a life of service, whatever we choose to do. She was deep of faith and belief that the work that any one of us can do that in any way touches another human being is an expression of great strength and great meaning. Our mother was a parent who would often say, "Don't you ever let anybody tell you who you are, you tell them who you are." My mother would often say to me, "Kamala, you may be the first to do many things, make sure you're not the last." And our mother was also the kind of parent who, if you ever came home complaining about anything, our mother would look at you, maybe with one hand on a hip, and with a straight face, she would say, "Well, what are you going to do about it?" So I decided to run for President of the United States. So with that, let's talk a little bit about the current occupant of the White House. Because we need to. We need to look at where we are right now. In the context of where we want to be, we gotta look at where we are. Yes, sister. So, the thing is, this fellow came into office making a whole lot of promises that he's not kept, and betrayed a lot of folks. Came in, said he was going to work for and support working people. Right? But yet passes a tax bill that benefits the top 1% and the biggest corporations in America. 60 of the biggest corporations in our country paid no taxes last year. How many people here paid no taxes? Said he was going to come in and help working people, including our farmers. And as all of you can imagine, I'm spending a lot of time in Iowa as an example, but we got a lot of farmers here in South Carolina. And what did he do? Then he engages in so-called trade policy by tweet, which was more an extension of the needs for his ego than it was about what is in the best interest of working people and the American family. Enters into a trade so-called policy that has resulted in farmers looking at potential bankruptcy. I've met with some in Iowa who have soybeans rotting in bins because over the period of the last 10 years or maybe even longer, they cultivated a market in China to sell their goods, and that market is now shut off from them. Some are predicting that as many as 700,000 auto workers by the end of the year may lose their jobs. American consumers today, because of this so-called trade policy that I call the Trump trade tax, American families are now spending on average $1.4 billion more a month for everything from shampoo to washing machines. He betrayed the American people. Made promises upon which he did not deliver. And here's the thing. When we think about who we are and what we are, we know that we are a nation of hardworking people. And we also know that this is a nation which over the last many years has set the rules in a way that they have not benefited the working people and working families of America. And what we need is a president who understands that and sees that and has some concern and some interest in the lives of people other than himself. This is a person who came in office on a campaign that was about make America great again. Well, again for whom? Again to what? To before the Voting Rights Act? To before the Civil Rights Act? To before Roe v. Wade? To before the Fair Housing Act? Well, we're not going back. And so, the challenge before us right now is to prosecute the case against 4 more years of Donald Trump. And as far as I'm concerned, there's plenty of evidence, which in a former career I would have called a rap sheet. And it is about that tax bill. It is about a failure to recognize the climate crisis and pulling out of the Paris Agreement. It is about not taking care of working people and working families. It is about a policy that was about trying to get rid of health care for millions of people who have benefited. It is about looking at the fact that a policy that, as it relates to these children who are arriving at our border, treating them in a way that is not reflective of the values we have when we think we have strong arms as America, and we will always embrace those fleeing harm. And I believe we need a prosecutor who can do that. And I will tell you that as a prosecutor, I took on the big banks who were preying on homeowners, resulting in a foreclosure crisis that devastated families around our nation. I have taken on the case against pharmaceutical companies that preyed on our seniors with fraudulent practices. I have taken on transnational criminal organizations that preyed on women and children. And I will tell you, Myrtle Beach, we've got a predator living in the White House. Instincts and a predatory nature. And the thing that you should know about predators, here's the thing. They prey on the vulnerable. They prey on those they perceive to be weak. They prey on those who are in need of help and often desperate for help. And the other thing about predators, they're cowards. It's time to turn the page and write the new chapter of our nation. Turn the page. Let's turn that page and write the new chapter. And here's how I think about that chapter. Part of, at least the title or the subtitle of that chapter, I believe, should be about the 3 a.m. agenda. Now you all are looking at me, Kamala, what are you talking about? Here's what I'm talking about. Here's how I think about priorities. And they are based on what I call the 3 in the morning thought. Right? Some people call it the middle of the night thought. Other people refer to that as the witching hour. You know what I'm talking about, right? When you wake up in the middle of the night with that thought that's been weighing on you. Well, for the vast majority of us, when we wake up thinking that thought, a couple points to be made. 1, we are never thinking about that thought through the lens of the party with which we're registered to vote. For the vast majority of us, when we wake up thinking that thought, we're not thinking about that thought through the lens of some simplistic demographic some pollster put us in. And for the vast majority of us, when we wake up at 3 a.m. thinking that thought, it usually has to do with one of just a very few things. Our personal health, the health of our children or our parents. For For so many, can I get a job, keep a job, pay the bills by the end of the month, retire with dignity? For our students, can I pay off those student loans? For our seniors, can I afford my prescription medication? For so many families in our country, can I help my family member get off their opioid or their drug addiction? The vast majority of us have so much more in common. And what we want and need is leadership that is focused on the issues that impact us every day. About so many of our priorities. And I think about that 3 a.m. agenda through a lens that is also about fighting for the America we believe in. The America we believe in. You know, we are a people that were founded by people who believed and had faith in where we could go, what we could be. And that is needed. That level of faith and belief is needed now. To imagine an America we believe in. And here's the America I believe in. I believe in an America where you only have to work one job to have a roof over your head and food on the table. Not in an America where we have today, where we have the current occupant of the White House crowing around about how this economy is doing so great. Right? Oh, the economy is great. The economy is great, he says. And then you ask, well, how so are you measuring the greatness of this economy of yours? And he points to the stock market. Well, that's fine if you own stocks. We say, well, how else are you measuring the greatness of this economy of yours?
Fox News.
And they point to Fox News. They point to, and they'll point to the unemployment numbers. Well, yeah, people are working. They're working 2 and 3 jobs. And to make the point again, in our America, you should only have to work 1 job to have a roof over your head and food on the table. So here's the America I believe in. And it will include what I intend to roll out to change our tax code, and specifically as it relates to this. For families that make less than $100,000 a year, you will receive a tax credit of up to $6,000 a year that you can collect at up to $500 a month, which will be all the difference between being able to get through the end of the month with dignity or not. Think about that in the context of the fact that right now in America, for almost half of American families, they cannot afford a $400 unexpected expense. Right now, today in America, in 99% of the counties, if you are a minimum wage worker working full-time, you cannot afford market rate for a 1-bedroom apartment. In America today, we are looking at people who are experiencing massive debt, be it student loan debt, car loan debt, credit card debt, to the point that last year, 12 million people had to take out a loan of, on average, $400 from the payday lender at an interest rate often in excess of 300%. Let's fight for the America we believe in, where folks can work hard. In the America we believe in, teachers are paid their value. Tell you the number of teachers I've met who are working 2, sometimes 3 jobs. There you go. And thank you for continuing to teach, because it is your passion and a calling and a gift. So 2, 3, 4 jobs. In America today, 94% of our public school teachers come out of their own pocket to help pay for school supplies. In our country today, teachers make on average 11% less than similarly educated professionals. And here's the thing. There are two groups of people raising our children. Parents, often with the assistance of grandparents and aunties and uncles, and our teachers. But we are not paying them their value. And for me, this is kind of personal. My first grade teacher, Mrs. Frances Wilson, God rest her soul, attended my law school graduation. But here's the thing. Many of us have a similar story. Of some teacher along the way who convinced us we were special. We weren't particularly special. But they told us we were, and we believed them. Which put us on a path to being here today, making a decision about who might be the next president of the United States. We, and I believe in, I am prepared to put in place what will be the first in our nation's history, federal investment in closing the teacher pay gap. So here in South Carolina, that gap is $9,300 a year. Let's put that in perspective. $9,300 a year, that's a year's worth of mortgage payments. $9,300 a year, that's a year's worth of grocery bills. $9,300 a year, that's putting a significant dent in student loan debt, which is one of the greatest barriers to our students coming out and joining a profession for which they have a passion. And I want to put a fine point on this issue. I strongly believe you should judge a society based on how it treats its children. And there are few greater expressions of love that a society can extend toward its children, like investing in their education and, by extension, their teachers. Let's talk about the America we believe in. In the America we believe in, we recognize that the climate crisis is real. We recognize that in large part, human behaviors have contributed to this crisis, and that those human behaviors can be changed without much change to our lifestyle, but we need leadership at the top that understands this. And instead of a president who is so busy pushing science fiction, we need a president who embraces science fact. And that's why I support a Green New Deal. That is why on day one I will re-enter us in the Paris Agreement, because America's leadership is critical to this issue. America's leadership must be present. Let's talk about an America we believe in. In the America we believe in, not one of our children will ever have to go to school to have a drill where they learn about how they should crouch in a corner or hide in a closet because there is a shooter roaming the hallways of their school. And let's be clear, that's what's happening in America today. I talk about this everywhere I go. I did an event recently where this young, it must have been 8 years old, he came up to me, tugged on my jacket, and in a real quiet voice he said, "I had one of those drills." Our children are sitting in classrooms, terrified. And when they go home after that drill, they ask their parents, "Why, Mommy and Daddy, did we have to have that drill?" To which, of course, the response is, because there are supposed leaders in Washington, D.C., who have failed to have the courage to reject a false choice which suggests you're either in favor of the Second Amendment or you want to take everyone's guns away, that who have failed to have the courage to agree. Fine if you want to go hunting, but we need reasonable gun safety laws in our country. And so I'll tell you guys, on this subject, I'm kind of done. I'm kind of just fed up. Because here's the thing, we've been talking about this for so long. And one might ask, well, why hasn't Congress acted? Perhaps they're waiting for a tragedy? Exactly. We have seen the worst of human tragedies. Are we waiting for a good idea? Nope. All the good ideas have been had. In fact, many of my colleagues on the debate stage have great ideas, all of which, for the most part, I embrace. But we're not lacking for ideas. What we're lacking for is courage. So here's what I'm prepared to do. And that's right, which will be the source of that political will be courage. And so here's what I'm prepared to do. When elected, I will give the United States Congress 100 days to pull their act together on this and put a bill on my desk for signature. And if they do not, I am prepared to take executive action to put in place what will be a comprehensive universal background check, to require also that the ATF take the licenses of gun dealers who violate the law. In Myrtle Beach, you should know, 90% of the guns associated with crime are sold by just 5% of the dealers. So what we need to do is, the ATF is doing a fine enough job on the A and the T, but we need to do a little encouragement on that F. And I am prepared to take executive action to ban the importation of assault weapons into our country. We need to take action. We need to take action. In the America we believe in, women are paid equally for equal work. Anybody know when the Equal Pay Act was passed? 1963. Since 1963, we have been talking about the fact that women are not paid equally for equal work. Fast forward to the year of our Lord 2019, and women are paid 80 cents on the dollar, black women 61 cents, Native American women 58 cents, Latinas 53 cents. And then there's our winning soccer team. USA! Weren't they fantastic? Weren't they fantastic? And they have scored more points than a lot of I actually sent a tweet out about that, but they've scored more points than the male team over like a 2-year period. Yeah, but they're a great source of pride for all of us. We've been talking about this a long time, and it's actually no longer a debatable point. Are women being paid equal for equal work? It's actually no longer a debatable point. It's just a fact. So the question becomes, as with so many of these issues, what are we going to do about it beyond talking about it? So, and when you elect me, here's what I'm prepared to do. I'm prepared to shift the burden from that working woman to have to prove that she's not making the same amount. Because right now the burden's on her. She might be raising a family, she's contributing to her household. The burden's on her to prove that she's not making the same amount. So what I'm prepared to do is shift the burden to the corporation. To prove that they are paying equal for equal work. And they will have to post on their website whether or not they are paying equal for equal work. And now I'm going to turn into an infomercial, and there's more. We will also require that for every 1% differential between how much they're paying men and women for equal work, they will, just as a method of encouragement, be fined an equal percent from their profits the year before. That'll get their attention. And again on this issue, so many of you may know a little bit about my background. I was the first woman elected to be district attorney of San Francisco. I was the first woman to be elected attorney general of a state of 40 million people, where I ran the second largest Department of Justice in the United States, second only to the United States Department of Justice. And then when I was elected to the United States Senate, I was elected as only the second black woman elected in the history of the United States Senate. And I will tell you that as a result perhaps of that background, there are often times where journalists will come up to me or others and they'll say, well, talk to us about women's issues. And I said, okay, I'm so glad you asked. Let's talk about the economy. Because here's the thing. When you lift up the economic status of women, you lift up the economic status of families and communities and all of society benefits. All of society benefits. Let's talk about an America we believe in. In an America we believe in, the Commander-in-Chief has as her first priority our nation's security. As opposed to what we have now, where we have a supposed Commander-in-Chief who on the issue that has been well established as fact, which is that Russia interfered in the election of the President of the United States, a supposed Commander-in-Chief who prefers to take the word of the Russian President over the word of the American intelligence community. A Commander-in-Chief who prefers to take the word of a North Korean dictator over the word of the American intelligence community when it comes to an American student who was tortured and later died. A Commander-in-Chief who prefers to take the word of a Saudi prince over the word of the American intelligence community when it comes to a journalist who was assassinated, a journalist who had American credentials. We need a new Commander-in-Chief. So those are a few aspects of the America we believe in. But I want to just close my comments so we can get to questions. I want to close my comments with this. Let's, as we march toward 2020, let us remember that one of the greatest strengths about who we are as a nation is that by our very nature, we are aspirational. We are a nation that was founded on noble ideals. The ideals that were present when we wrote the Constitution of the United States and all of its amendments and the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights and those words we spoke in 1776, that we are all and should be treated as equals. We are aspirational. We are also clear-eyed. We've not yet reached those ideals. But the strength of who we are as a nation is we are always prepared to fight to get there. And so fight we will, and fight we must. Understanding that this then is a fight that is born out of optimism. This is a fight that is born out of knowing and believing in what can be, unburdened by what has been. And this is a fight that is not only for the soul of our country, this, most importantly, is a fight that is born out of love of country. Is a fight we will win.
Earn the pay!
Earn the pay!
Please, one more time, give it up for. At this point in time, we would like to open up the floor for some questions. You got a question?
We have microphones. We have microphones.
Oh. Anyone with a question? Stand up. Okay, let's get over there first, and then we'll go over there. I'm coming, baby. Come. Oh, okay, come on. What's your question?
Hello, Senator. I'm not going to stand it. Hello, Senator. I met you at Big Mike's, and I'm on your
Yes.
bandwagon, and if you want to see a great picture of us, go to Joe McVeigh Facebook, and you'll get a great picture of this. A question was asked, and they said, well, I'll get into that later. I have a very serious thing.
Yes.
I think we cannot go immediately into health care for all. I just don't think we can do 300 people. If you ask the people in this room how many of them like Medicare, you're going to get a rounding applause.
Yes.
And if you ask who don't, tell them to vote Republican. That's all I can tell you. Now, we need to blend into it. Take the people that are there, move to 55, and we will compete with private industry. I knew a woman, her only job as a nurse was to get up every day and find 30 people that she could disqualify from getting paid what they were due. So we've got to, this is a very important thing, as you know.
Yes.
But we can't just go into it, we got to blend into it. And I wish you the very best, and I'm glad I got to see you again.
Thank you. I appreciate you, Mr. McFadden. And I thank you for raising probably one of the most critical issues in America today, which is that we still have so many individuals and families in our country that do not have access to health care because it costs too much. Because it costs too much. And here's the thing, let's start with the principle that we share. Access to health care should be a right and not a privilege of just those who can afford it. The other piece of it is that we have to recognize that over a significant amount of time, the cost of health care has been jacked up and jacked up and jacked up by the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies. Seniors in our country, on average, for arthritis medication, have to pay $4,000 out of pocket because insurance doesn't cover it. You look at diabetes patients, 1 in 4 cannot afford their insulin. There is a syringe that contains a drug that will save the life of someone who is OD'd off of opioids, and that syringe can cost as much as $4,000. Let's also recognize that it is a story every night in America somewhere, that there is a parent who has a child that has a temperature that's out of control and calls the pediatrician or 911, what should I do? And they say, go to the emergency room. So what happens? That parent then drives to the hospital, they're in the parking lot with their child in the back seat, looking at those sliding glass doors. One hand on that baby's forehead, knowing if they walk through those sliding glass doors, they will be out a $5,000 deductible. They have insurance. They'll be out a $5,000 deductible. So we have got to reform the healthcare system in America. There's no question about it. And that's the reason I support Medicare for all. But to your point, it can't just happen overnight. There will be a transition period, which I absolutely build into my vision for what we need to do for Medicare for all. There's no question. And we've got to get to a place where we also understand that we need a president who knows how to fight against these pharmaceutical companies and these special interests. Since I've been in D.C., now over the last 2 years and some months when I arrived at the United States Senate, you know, we've always talked about the lobbyists and the special interests. It's real. It's real. And the way that they have influenced so much policy, and in particular healthcare policy, it is a crying shame. And so I appreciate your point very much, and I thank you for raising the issue.
We have a question over here, if someone can get him a mic. If not, you know what, I can do it. Okay, there's a big right there.
Hi, my name is Joanne, and I really, really want to beat Trump. And
Me too.
I'm concerned that the Democrats are only focusing on the humanitarian problems at the border and not putting forth policies to control or reduce the flow of immigrants from the Northern Triangle. How would you address President Trump when he claims the Democrats are for open borders?
Well, one, I appreciate your question. It's a wonderful and important question that you've raised, which is, let's be clear about the distinctions. So let's be clear that it is not representative of American values to have a policy that's about separating children from their parents. It is not reflective of American values to have a policy that is about rejecting people who are, to your point, of the Northern Triangle, fleeing murder capitals of the world. And if, just for a moment, if you'll indulge me, I think on so many things that are about public policy, it's really important to think about it through the lens of a real human being. So for a moment, if we could just talk about a mother or a father who decides to pay a coyote to transport their child from out of their country of origin, in this case, murder capitals of the world, through an entire foreign country of Mexico to come here facing unknown peril. Why would that parent do that? It is because that parent knows and believes that if they were to stay where they are, it will be worse and more dangerous. But what has American policy under this president been on that subject? To look at those children and essentially say, go back to where you came from. That is not reflective of our values. More, and equally important, let's remember, we have laws in place imagining that this will and does happen. That people flee harm from other places and come to this nation that we founded saying we have strong arms and will embrace and protect those that are fleeing harm. And instead, this president says, we're going to flick you back to where you came from. Not reflective of the values of our country. You look, I went down after the debates. I don't know if any of you saw the debates that happened. We did it a couple weeks ago. So they were in Miami. That next morning, I went down before I left Florida to a place in Florida called Homestead. In Homestead, Florida, you will find a private detention facility that is paid by your tax dollars that currently houses 2,700 children. As a member of the United States Senate, and let me just be clear, I serve on the Senate Intelligence Committee, I serve on the Senate Homeland Security Committee, in addition to Judiciary and Budget, and said to them, you need to show us what's going on inside the facility, and they refused. So then, I walked down the road and got on a ladder so I could look in, and I'm going to tell you what I saw. I saw children lined up in single file by gender, being walked into a barrack. These are not values that are reflective of who we are. So we have to say, one, stop the human rights abuses and shut down these private detention facilities. Because let's be clear, these private detention facilities, if you just step back and think about what is the business model at play, the business model is for certain human beings to profit off the incarceration of other human beings called children. Now, on the issue of border security, we have to enforce our laws and keep our borders safe. And there is no question, and it is part of what this president is trying to do to really misinform the American people, to say that Democrats don't care about border security. I've not heard, I don't know, but I can speak for myself. I am absolutely in favor of border security. We have to, any nation has to be concerned with that, and we of course do. But we can't accept a false choice. But the fact is, let's also be clear that we're getting played on this issue. We're getting played. The American people are getting played. This guy came in when we had essentially net zero immigration, when he came into office, and he ran that campaign about building a wall, which is basically a multi-billion-dollar vanity project for him. And by the way, that wall will not get built. Security, yes on comprehensive immigration reform with a pathway toward citizenship, yes on protecting our DACA young people and reinstating those DACA protections immediately, including protecting the parents of those DACA young people. All of that can coexist in the America I think we believe in.
We had a young lady over here with a question.
Throughout your criminal justice career in California, you supported things such as the use of the death penalty, the criminalization of truancy, and upholding sentences of those wrongfully convicted. How, if at all, would you alter the way you plan on conducting yourself as our chief executive in comparison to your time as a prosecutor, district attorney, and attorney general in the state of California?
I want you to look at my record, and then you will know I've been personally opposed to the death penalty my entire career. And I will also tell you that, listen, I was born a child of parents who were active in the civil rights movement. I was born in a community where we were acutely aware growing up of all of what is wrong and flawed and the injustices that can take place in our criminal justice system. There is frankly not a black man I know, be he a relative, a friend, or a colleague, who has not faced some level of profiling or discrimination. So when I made a decision to become a prosecutor, it was a very conscious decision. And the decision was based on two things most fundamentally. One, that for systems that require reform, I I strongly believe there is a role to be played on the outside in terms of activism and putting pressure on that system. And I believe if we want to be effective, we also need to be inside and at the table where the decisions are being made. Two, I am never going to apologize for having prosecuted one individual who molested a child, or a woman who was raped, or somebody who was killed by murder. Never going to apologize for that. Because all communities want safe communities. And so I will tell you, I am proud of my record of having been one of the first elected prosecutors in the nation to create a reentry initiative focused on young offenders, young adult offenders, and getting them jobs and counseling and support, knowing that by doing that we would reduce the likelihood of them reoffending and we would create smarter and safer communities. I'm never going to apologize for, and in fact be proud of, the work that I did in saying we need to focus on elementary school truancy. Why? Because I saw that we had an inordinate amount of homicide victims who were under the age of 25. And instead of just accepting that that would be a statistic, I asked, who are they? And the data came back to me that included the fact that 94% were high school dropouts. I then went over to the school district and I said, what's going on? And I learned that 40% of our elementary school students were missing up to 50, 60, 80 days of a 180-day school year. When I looked into the issue further, I learned that an elementary school truant is 3 to 4 times likely to be a high school dropout. At the time, I learned that 80% of the prisoners in the United States are high school dropouts. I think that the number today is about 70%. I learned that an African-American man who was a high school dropout between the age of 30 and 34 is 2/3 likely to have been in jail, be in jail, or dead. And I said, you know what? Nobody's paying attention to this issue. If it had been the children in communities that have wealth, the alarms would have been sounding for elementary school students who are missing 50, 60, up to 80 days of a 180-day school year. And the system needs to be held accountable. And so I'm proud of the work that we did in holding the system accountable, improving attendance rates by over 30% for those children. I'm proud of the work that I did as the Attorney General of California, running the second largest Department of Justice, to be one of the first to run a state law enforcement agency and require that my special agents wear body cameras that are turned on. I'm proud of the work I've done, being in the United States Senate and a leader on what we need to do to reform the bail system in this country, because the money bail system means that there are people sitting in jail every day waiting to go to trial simply because they can't afford to pay bond or bail, while other people who have money are walking free, because in my mind this is not only a criminal justice issue, this is an economic justice issue. And I will tell you, as President of the United States, it is my full intention to continue to do this work in a way that is also about rejecting what the current administration has been doing when they've been trying to revive the war on drugs. What this current administration has been doing in shutting down pattern and practice investigations and consent decrees. We need a President of the United States who knows the system from the inside and has a track record of working on reform, because here's the bottom line for me. The bottom line for me is that it is actually the smart way to approach public safety, to understand and recognize the things that have been wrong about how we have run our criminal justice system and to implement reform. To do that is not only going to be the right thing, it will be the smart thing to do.
Actually had a question that I wanted to ask you. In our country, we are now faced with laws against females. and laws saying what we can do to our body and what we can't have done to our body. There are laws that have passed that says if 11-year-old little girl is raped and she gets pregnant, she cannot have an abortion or she may go to jail. How do we fix that?
I'm glad you brought that up, Tiffany. It's a really important issue. So I think about this in a couple of ways. One, I think about this issue of women's access to reproductive health, knowing that right now, women's access to reproductive health in our country is under attack. You know, I was recently in Alabama where they passed that law that would criminalize and incarcerate a doctor for up to 99 years for supervised abortion care. I look at this issue also in the context of, there's a phrase that I paraphrased from Coretta Scott King, who many years ago famously, I think, said, the fight for civil rights, and by that I think she meant the fight for justice, the fight for equality, the fight for civil rights must be fought and won with each generation. And I think what she meant there is, one, that it is the very nature of this fight for civil rights and for equality and justice, that the nature of it is such that whatever gains we make, they will not be permanent. It's just the nature of it. So the second point then is understanding that is just the nature of it. Do not despair. Do not throw up our hands when it's time to roll up our sleeves. And on so many issues, and to your point on the issue of choice and access to reproductive health care for women, I think about it that way, which is that we will never permanently achieve our goals. We are going to have to be vigilant. And this is one of those moments in time where we are going to have to continue to fight. And so that's going to be through a number of ways. I mean, one, you know, I'm obviously running for president, but I would say that this is one of those many issues that also highlights the importance of local and state elections. Because who serves in those state legislatures matters. They get to write the rules. The other piece I'd say is that we got to do all that we can to support the people who are on the ground, who are giving those women the support that they need. Because it is not being an alarmist, it is not extreme to say that the result of those policies will be that women will die. And in particular, poor women and women of color. Those who do not otherwise have access to transportation to go to a state where it might otherwise be legal and physician assisted. So the consequences are potentially severe of these policies. And so part of it is going to have to be to continue to work on the defense, but also, I think everyone's kind of figured out, I'm also all about the offense. So here's what I'm also prepared to do as president. And that is running the Department of Justice and the United States Department of Justice to require that for any state that has a history of impeding or violating a woman's access to reproductive health care, that any law they pass has to be cleared by the United States Department of Justice to determine if it comports with the Constitution and Roe v. Wade. That's called pre-clearance. And until it clears constitutional muster, it cannot go into effect.
I want to thank everyone who came to speak with her today, to realize her vision. Like I told you guys, you want someone who understands what we go through on a daily basis, not just in South Carolina, but all across the country. She travels, she takes her time, she meets with us, she speaks with us. Not only was she raised by an amazing woman, her mother was a scientist, her father was a teacher. They lived dreams that we thought we could never have, and we have those dreams.